You've spent your whole life facing a wall, chained in place since before you can remember, watching shadows move across the stone. Those shadows are cast by objects carried behind you, lit by a fire you've never turned around to see. You call them real, because nothing else has ever competed with them for that title. This is the split Plato is building, the sensible world, whatever shows up to your eyes, against the intelligible world, what your reason grasps once it stops trusting appearances as the whole truth. Someone drags you loose, toward the fire first, which already burns your eyes after a lifetime of dim light, then out into open sun, and it isn't relief, it's pain sharp enough to make you want the chains back. That instinct to retreat is the most honest part of the whole story. Growth was never going to feel like comfort. Leaving the cave was never about learning a new fact. It's a full turn of the soul, away from whatever merely looks good toward the form of the good itself, the thing that makes anything worth knowing, knowable at all. And if you climbed all the way out, then went back down to tell the others what you saw, they wouldn't thank you. They'd see someone stumbling in the dark, talking about a sun that was never on their wall, and call you the one who'd lost his mind. Hold an acorn in your hand. Ask what it's made of, and you get the shallow answer. Water, cellulose, plant tissue, the material cause, the one modern explanations tend to stop at. Ask what shape is organizing that material, and you find the formal cause, the specific oak pattern already structuring the acorn from the inside, the reason it grows into a tree and not a mushroom. Ask what set the whole process moving, and you find the efficient cause, soil, rain, sunlight, acting on a seed that could never grow itself alone. This is where Aristotle quietly solves a problem his own teacher never could. Plato needed an entire separate realm of perfect forms, floating outside the world, to explain why anything is what it is. Aristotle didn't need one. He put the form inside the object itself, potential already waiting to become actual, the acorn containing the oak as a possibility, working itself out over time. Keep going, and the question stops being physical. Ask what the acorn is for, and you reach the final cause, becoming an oak, the end it was oriented toward from the start. And Aristotle considered this the most important cause of the four, the one that actually explains a thing, rather than just describing it. Run the same four questions on your own life. What you're made of is easy to list. Your job, your habits, your circumstances. What set you moving is easy too. Upbringing, luck, timing. The question almost nobody can answer is the fourth one, what all of it is actually for. And Aristotle would say that without an answer, you don't yet understand your own life, no matter how detailed the first three answers are. You'd say without hesitation that you see this room exactly as it is. Light hits your eyes, your brain processes it, reality gets handed to you directly. That claim feels too obvious to argue with. Kant argued with it anyway, and his move became known as a Copernican revolution because it flipped the entire direction of the question. Instead of asking how your mind matches the world, he asked whether the world only becomes knowable by first passing through structures your mind supplies. Space and time, in his account, aren't things you discover out there. They're forms of sensibility, part of the equipment your mind uses to organize raw experience before you're even aware of organizing anything. On top of that, your understanding applies categories, ideas like causality and unity, that let scattered sensations become a coherent, connected world rather than noise. You've never had a single experience that wasn't already shaped by that equipment, which means reality splits in two. Phenomena, the world as it appears once processed by your mind, is the only version you will ever directly meet. Noumena, the thing in itself, sits permanently behind that processing, not because you haven't looked hard enough, but because looking is exactly what creates the distance. People flatten this into everything being an illusion. That was never the claim. The chair is really there. What's unreachable is the chair independent of the mind organizing it into something solid and bounded in the first place. So the honest question isn't whether the world is real, it's whether you're experiencing reality itself, or only the one edition of it your mind was ever built to produce. Nearly all of Western logic rests on one assumption: a thing cannot be both itself and its opposite at the same time. Contradiction is treated as an error, something to eliminate the moment it appears. Hegel rejected that completely. In his account, contradiction is the mechanism through which reality develops, not a flaw interrupting it. An idea, pushed far enough, generates the tension of its own negation, and that tension doesn't simply cancel out. It gets carried forward and absorbed into something more complete than either side alone. A movement people flatten into thesis, antithesis, synthesis, a formula Hegel barely used, and one that misses how the process actually works. He applied this same logic to consciousness itself. You don't become a self through quiet introspection, sealed off from everyone else. You become one through recognition, needing another consciousness to confirm you as real, which is the engine behind his famous master and slave relationship. The master who appears to have won ends up completely dependent on the slave for the recognition that defines his status, trapped by the very power that was supposed to make him free. And this isn't just a story about two people. Hegel scales it up into freedom itself, treating it as something that develops historically across societies, not a fixed possession any individual simply has in isolation. So the contradiction currently running through your own life, the one you've been trying to resolve and move past as quickly as possible, might not be a problem blocking your next self. It might be the actual process building it. Kant left behind an unsolved problem when he died. The thing in itself, reality apart from any mind, sealed off permanently, since observing anything at all requires the very mental filters that create the distance in the first place. A generation of philosophers treated this as a wall to work around. Schopenhauer thought he'd found a door. His argument starts with representation, the everyday world as it appears to you, structured by space, time, and cause and effect, exactly as Kant described. But there's one object in that world you don't only observe from outside: your own body. You don't just see your hand move. You feel it want things from the inside: hunger, desire, aversion, with no gap between observing and being. He called that raw, directionless force the will, and made the claim that stopped his contemporaries cold. This same blind striving underlies all of existence, not just you, and not just living things. Here's the part that should actually unsettle you. The will doesn't want anything specific. It wants endlessly, and satisfying one craving only clears space for the next to move in. Get the job, the relationship, the recognition you were chasing, and relief lasts days before some new lack shows up demanding attention. That cycle, between momentary satisfaction and the boredom that follows once desire runs out of targets, is the entire shape of a life driven by will rather than reason. He offered two ways out, not permanent escapes. Art, genuine aesthetic contemplation, briefly stops the wanting by giving you something to observe instead of consume. Compassion goes further, dissolving the illusion that your own striving matters more than anyone else's, which is as close as Schopenhauer gets to denying the will altogether. So what exactly are you chasing tonight, and what happens the morning after you finally catch it? Start with a chair. You know instantly what it is, its shape, its use. Zoom out, and you know what a room is, a building, a city, all the way up to the world itself, each level defined by one thing's relation to other things around it. Every question up to that point has been about beings. This object, that object, how they connect. Heidegger's claim is that across 25 centuries, philosophy kept asking what specific things are, while forgetting to ask what it even means for anything to be at all. The difference he draws between beings and being itself. And he insists you can't investigate that question the way you'd investigate a rock, from a safe distance, because you're not a detached mind observing an external universe. You're already inside it, entangled, which is exactly what his term Dasein is built to capture, the one entity for whom its own existence is a live question rather than a settled fact. Part of what defines Dasein is being in the world, not as location but as constant, practical involvement, using tools, caring about outcomes, never simply staring at objects like a scientist in a lab. You didn't choose the point you were thrown into either, not your body, your era, your language, a condition he calls thrownness, the raw fact of finding yourself already underway before you had any say in the terms. Most of the time, you're not even living as yourself inside that thrownness. You're living as das Man, the anonymous they, doing what one does, wanting what one is supposed to want, absorbed into an inherited version of living that asks nothing real of you, comfortable precisely because it was never yours to begin with. What breaks that spell isn't another fact stacked on top of the ones you already have. It's death, held not as a distant future event to schedule around, but as a possibility that is absolutely, non-negotiably yours, the one thing nobody can undergo in your place. Facing it properly is what Heidegger calls authenticity, and it's the only thing sharp enough to show you which parts of today were actually chosen by you, and which were das Man, wearing your face. 19th century physics handed philosophy a problem it never asked for. The second law of thermodynamics states that disorder only increases, that every closed system runs down over time, and given enough time, that includes the universe itself, stars and heat, and structure eventually dissolving into flat, purposeless equilibrium. Not a metaphor, a measured fact about the universe you actually live in. Nietzsche watched this land on a culture that had already lost its religious foundation without fully admitting it yet. God is dead, his most quoted line, was never a taunt. It was a diagnosis, a civilization still running on inherited moral certainty, while the cosmic backing for that certainty had already quietly dissolved, the same way heat dissolves into disorder. That collapse is what he meant by nihilism, not despair as a mood, but the slow realization that the highest values you inherited, purpose, absolute good, cosmic justice, have no ground left holding them up. Most people never notice, because they keep living off the moral architecture belief used to justify the way you'd keep living in a house without checking if the foundation was still there. His method for testing which values actually deserve to survive was genealogy. Don't ask whether a value is true. Ask where it came from. Trace concepts like humility or meekness back far enough, he argued, and you find resentment, values invented by the powerless to bind the powerful, dressed up afterward as timeless virtue. Underneath all of it, he placed something more basic than survival or pleasure: the will to power, a drive toward growth, expansion, and self-overcoming that every living thing expresses in its own way. His answer to the collapse wasn't despair. It was the Übermensch, not a superior race or a strongman fantasy, but someone capable of creating values instead of inheriting them secondhand. He tested the sincerity of those values with his hardest thought experiment: eternal recurrence. Imagine living this exact life again, identical in every detail, forever. If the thought crushes you, you're not living something you actually endorse. If you could want the loop, you've found something closer to your own values than anything borrowed. So if nobody could hand you a value system anymore, none of it inherited, none of it assumed, what exactly would you choose to build in its place? The early Wittgenstein believed language worked like a picture. A proposition maps onto a state of affairs the same way a photograph matches its subject. True if the picture matches reality, false if it doesn't. Under that view, meaningful language has limits, and anything trying to describe what lies beyond those limits, ethics, the meaning of existence, the mystical, isn't false. It's meaningless in a technical sense, an attempt to say what can only be shown. He thought the honest response to most of philosophy's grand questions was silence. He later abandoned that picture almost entirely, in a shift so sharp it's usually taught as two different philosophers. Meaning, he decided, isn't fixed by matching words to things. Its use, the specific role a word plays inside what he called a language game, a set of rules that shift depending on the context you're playing in. Try to define the word game itself, and you'll fail the same way he predicted, because no single feature runs through chess, tag, and solitaire at once. What holds the category together is family resemblance, overlapping similarities with no thread connecting every member. And the same word can function completely differently, depending on the form of life it's embedded in, the shared practices and context that give it a role at all. Confusion creeps in exactly when you drag a word out of its game and demand it behave the same way everywhere, treating time, or the self, or being, as if each had one fixed essence sitting underneath every possible context. Under this view, philosophy isn't the construction of new metaphysical theories, it's clarification, and some of the deepest problems the field has wrestled with for centuries don't get solved. They disappear entirely once the linguistic confusion behind them gets exposed. So the question this leaves you holding isn't about games anymore. It's whether the deepest puzzle that's ever kept you up at night was a mystery waiting to be cracked, or a word dragged out of its game, still waiting for you to notice.